Hey, welcome back to Make Stuff Nation. I've always wanted to build my own wooden boat. I was given an old oak planked Snipe back in high school with the intent of restoring it, but as I got into that project, the boat was completely rotted out and all I was able to salvage was the aluminum mast and some of the hardware. As you can see, our cat Victor and our dog Alan are most enthused to be my helpers. The first major step in the construction of this boat is going to be doing the layout. For that, I'm going to go to the store and grab a couple sheets of plywood and I'll draw out the boat in full scale on those boards. I'll then use that drawing to make the patterns for making the frames of the hull of the boat. Well, I'm back from the store. Let me show you what I got. I picked up 3 sheets of this 1/4 inch plywood. It's pretty low quality, but I was just looking for a nice smooth surface because I'm going to be writing on this. I also got some primer and a paint roller. Basically, I'm going to paint 2 of these sheets and then butt them together to make a 4 foot by 16 foot sheet that I'll do all my layout and lofting on. Well, that's it for painting these 2 panels. I'm going to let them dry overnight, then we'll get them moved inside and set up for the layout. Last night I put a second coat of primer on the sheets and let it dry overnight. I've now moved them inside and I'll show you what I have set up for my layout area. I've cleared out an area in our living room and entryway, which we never use, and put the plywood end to end. This will give me enough room to lay out the whole boat. The seam in the middle lines up pretty well, but I think what I'm going to do is put a couple strips of wood underneath it and hot glue it together so I can take it apart if I need to move it out of the way, and it'll still hold it securely enough for me to do the drawing. What do you think, Alan? Are you looking for the male person? You gonna bark at him? You're so ferocious. As you can see, Victor has already made himself right at home and will probably destroy everything. I've got all my supplies. I've got my glue gun warming up. I've got a straight edge to keep the edges aligned. I've got the piece of wood I'm going to join them with, and then the 2 planks. And we'll line this up underneath, about halfway. And then just a couple dabs of glue. And then this glue actually gives me a little bit of working time. So I'm going to do my dabs of glue and then put the piece in place. And the edges should naturally line it up. We'll check it for straight edge. Check the straight edge again. Alright, that looks pretty good. And now we'll be ready to start our layout. Now I'm back out in the shop to make some battens that are more than 16 feet long so I can do the layout. I've got 2 pieces of 8 foot and 1 piece of approximately 6 foot pine lattice board. It's about 1/4 inch by 1.5 inches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rip these down the middle and then scarf them together to make a couple 20 foot long battens. I want these scarves to overlap approximately 3 inches, so I'm just going to mark in the end from each board and then I'll trim them. Okay, this is going to be my longest batten made out of 3 pieces. So I've got 2 pieces with the scarf joint cut on one end and then 1 piece with a scarf cut on both ends. To do the first joint, just apply a little bit of glue and clamp it. Let that cure for a while and then I'll do the other end. While I'm waiting for those scarf joints to dry, I'm going to cut down this batten in half, and this will be a shorter, stiffer batten that'll help me lay out the stem of the boat. Alright, I've added this piece of wood to give the joint a little bit of support and help keep everything aligned. I've leveled everything out and I think we're ready to join these 2 boards. Let that set up a bit and then we'll clean the joint. The first step in laying out this boat is going to be drawing a reference line along the bottom of the plywood. I'm going to draw this reference line just off the left edge using straight edges and then check it with a laser. The edge of this plywood is already straight, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure in 2 centimeters from that, check it with my straight edge and use that to draw my line. Well, that looks pretty straight to the naked eye, but let's get out the laser and check and see how straight it actually is. So we've got some warp to the plywood. But it looks like within a couple millimeters. Thanks for your help, Victor. Yeah, it looks pretty spot on. My next step is to mark out stations 0 through 5 and the transom. In the original plans, they're 31 inches apart, but on the new measuring data sheet from the Snipe Association, everything's in metric, so I'll be using the most recent metric version. Victor, what are you doing with my string? I'm going to mark station 0 by measuring in 4 centimeters from the left edge of my board on my baseline. Now I'm going to draw a perpendicular line up from the baseline. I'll use good old Pythagoras for that. 30 centimeters. Measure up 40 from the base. And then the hypotenuse will be 50 centimeters. Yep, that checks out. Now I'll draw the rest of the line. And then I'll label that down here at the bottom as station 0. We've just made this vertical line on our baseline. Now it's time to draw in the station 1 line. It's 788 millimeters from station 0 to station 1. 780, 788. What I've decided to do, rather than marking out a station and drawing the station line and then moving on to the next, I'm going to mark out all the station positions and then come back and draw the station lines. There's an additional way to draw these station lines than using a 3-4-5 triangle. You can use a compass, measure out equal distances from the station mark, strike an arc from those points, and where the arc intersects will be perpendicular to your station mark. Now just a few more of them to draw. And for the transom station, I'll just use the 3-4-5 method again. Now that I have all the station lines marked out, it's time to start laying out the profile view. For the profile of the boat, at each station, they list an ideal height for the shear, chine, and keel. So for each one of these heights, it has a set of tolerances associated with it. For the height of the keel, it's plus or minus 6 millimeters. For the height of the chine, it's plus or minus 6 millimeters. For the height of the shear, it's plus 0, minus 25 millimeters at each station. So I'm going to mark out the tolerances for these, and then I will use my battens to fair a line to get a nice smooth curved line between each station. That's station 1. Now I can mark in the tolerances. So the shear is plus 0, minus 25. The chine is plus or minus 6. And then the keel is plus or minus 6. Now I just have to do all the rest of the stations. Here's a close-up of how I'm marking these. I've got an S for shear and then the minus 25 millimeter tolerance. Towards the keel of the boat, I have the chine marked with a C and then the plus or minus 6 millimeters. And then the same for the keel, plus or minus 6 millimeters. On to station 2. I've got all the heights for the profile view marked out on the station lines, but now for the tricky parts. I need to draw in these dimensions for the transom, and then after that I have to construct the stem or bow line using this table of dimensions here. To come over from station 6, 216 millimeters, 172 millimeters up from that is going to be the bottom corner of the transom. Alright, so here's the ideal point, and then I've got my tolerances drawn in to either shift it fore or aft or high or low. What I'm going to do is they list a height here for the chine as it meets the transom, and the distance just depends on the angle of your transom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw an ideal line for the chine height at the transom, and then I'll mark the tolerances off of that, and I can use my battens to get the lines fared out and draw in the transom. Cool. This is what I have drawn out at the transom of the boat. Here's our baseline. Here's our corner where the transom is going to meet the keel with the tolerances. Here's the line where the chine will intersect the transom, probably somewhere right in here. And then up here is where the shear meets the transom. Now I'm going to start constructing the stem of the boat. My first reference point per the plans is 400. That's 1 point down. So on the stem, all the heights are plus minus 0 tolerance. The distance aft of station 0 has a plus minus 6 millimeter tolerance. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mark out all my heights with the 0 tolerance, sketch in those height lines, and then I'll come in and mark out my positions aft of station 0 for the stem. Alright, that's the tolerances for the stem drafted out. So now it's time to grab the battens and start lofting some lines. What do you think, Alan? You good boy? You want some belly rubs? Belly rubs? Oh, belly rubs. Yeah. He's a good boy. Don't lift the plan. I've brought in my battens and I've got some canned food as weights to help as extra hands. And I'm going to draw my shear line first. What I've done is I've tacked a staple in, and I'm going to be using the bottom edge of this batten to draw my shear line. So what I need to do is line it up between each set of tolerances at each station, and then I'll sight down the line to make sure I have a nice fair curve. Once I'm happy with the curve, I'll draw the line off the batten. So here's the staple right at the maximum height of the shear at the bow. And I'm going to use a can to help hold that in place. I've also set the aft limit of the shear at its maximum height, and now I just need to fair the line through the tolerances at the rest of the stations. Okay, I'm within my tolerances at each one of the stations, so now I'm going to go ahead and draw the line. Now that the line's drawn, I can go ahead and remove the batten and check my work. So here's where the shear line meets the transom. We're at the top of our tolerances there. Progressing down, station 5, we're within our tolerances. 4, we're near the minimum, but still within. Station 3, again, at the low end of the tolerance. Station 2, right in the middle. Station 1, we're near the top. And then station 0 at the bow, we are right at the max height. I'm pretty happy with the shear line of the boat. Now I'm going to draw the keel. I'll do the chine last. For the keel of the boat, I'm going to shoot right for the middle of the tolerances. That should make the construction relatively easy, keep it within the class design. Again, I'm going to use the bottom of the batten to strike my line. So I'm just put a staple in here for my height. At the front of the boat, I have this reference point here. I'm going to go right for the middle of that range, and I'll put a staple at the 229, and I'll fair in the lines from there. There we go. Mark that. Now I can just bend the keel to fit the rest of the stations. All right, I've got the keel line fared out pretty well. Up forward here, from station 1 to station 0 is the stem. That's a more drastic curve that I'll have to fare in with another batten. Now that I have the keel line drawn, I can draw the transom, and that'll let me fix the aft edge of the chine. For the transom, I'll just match up the shear line at station 6 to the aft end of the keel line. Now my chine will intersect somewhere right around here, plus or minus 6 from this line. Well, it's late. I already broke one batten. The other one seems to be a little too stiff, so I'm going to need to cut it a little more narrow. So I think it's time to call it a night. This morning I went out to the shop and cut a couple new battens. I cut them really thin, so I should be able to use it to shape the stem properly. Additionally, I got some knee pads because working on this floor is really rough. All right, the first two marks, I'm right in the middle of the tolerances. 5th point looks good, 6th point looks good, and that fares in nicely with the keel line. All right, now to draw the chine. The next step of the layout is to draw a half plan view. We'll mark out the keel width, the chine width, and the shear width at each station. All right, starting at station 1. Drawing out the keel line first. One thing I did to help make the plan and profile views easier to differentiate is I've highlighted the lines on the profile view in pink and then the lines on the half breadth plan view in green. My next step is going to be diagramming out the cross section at each station. I'm going to use the station 4 line as my center line, and then I'll draw out stations 1, 2, and 3 on the right side, and then I'll do stations 4 and 5 on the left side. What's up, Alan? You go outside? Oh, come on. Let's go. All right, it's time to finish up the layout of the boat. I've done a couple things since I last recorded. I've laid out the fore and aft decks in pink here. That's the aft deck. Then as we move up forward, you can see the fore deck here. I also completed the section layouts and drew out the cockpit. Now I will need to modify this. I drew it too wide. So here's the fore end of the cockpit. The side follows the shear line of the boat, and then back to the aft side of the cockpit. It's within tolerances at the fore and aft corner, but in the middle, because of it following the shear, it's too wide. So I'm going to move the whole cockpit in just a little narrower. The next thing I need to do is lay out where the centerboard case is going to be. The dimensions list a aft edge tolerance for the centerboard slot and then the centerboard length. as well as heights for the centerboard case. And then I have to plot out the mast step, which is going to be right around here. It lists a minimum height from the mast step to the mast datum, which is up by the shear line, and then also tolerances for the mast position fore and aft from the datum. The last thing we need to do on the layout is draw in the mast step. The tolerances for the mast step, it says it should be between 390 and 400 millimeters vertically from where the shear is projected onto the mast. So again, we've got our shear line here. We'll just come down 390 to 400 millimeters to set the mast step point. We'll choose right in the middle, 395. So I'm not going to draw these lines completely down to the keel because we haven't drawn in the thicknesses of the keel or keel batten yet. That'll give us a general idea. There, so this will be the mast step. Obviously we'll have the keel batten and then the keel, and then we'll basically have a block that the mast is stepped on. I do intend to put in a slider so that I can move the mast fore and aft within the limit, and that'll adjust the handling characteristics depending on winds. So just as a review, we've got the profile view highlighted in pink, the plan view in green, and then the cross section or body plan view in yellow. All the major layouts are drawn in. We've got the foredeck, the shear line, the chine, and then the keel line. We've got the mast step, the hole for the mast laying out in both the plan and profile view. We've got the centerboard case, the centerboard slot, the cockpit, and then aft we have the aft deck and transom. Here on the body plan view, we have on the right side all the stations forward of a midship. So here's station 1, 2, and 3. And then over on that side, we have all the stations aft of midship. So stations 4, 5, and then the transom. Well, that completes all the layout work and line lofting for this plywood snipe. In my next video, I'll start making all the templates for the frames and stem, and I'll also start working on the assembly jig. I'll put associate links down in the description for any of the equipment that I used. I hope you found this video entertaining and useful. And again, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching Make Stuff Nation. We'll see you next time.